The Texas Chain Saw Massacre 1974 is still scary to this day. Sure, it might turn 50 in 2024 and people will say that the movie is very old, but it still holds up today. I don't even watch many movies that were released in the 70s. A few movies that I have seen from this decade are Clockwork Orange, Rocky, The Exorcist, Jaws, Halloween, and you guessed it, The Texas Chain Saw Massacre. An exploitation film is a film intended to attract an audience by means of its sensationalist or controversial content. The Texas Chain Saw was one of those movies. Tobe Hooper marketed the film to be based on true events to attract a wider audience and to act as a subtle commentary on the era's political climate. Life in the 1970s was described as a tumultuous period where the Vietnam War came to an end and the Watergate scandal led to the resignation of former President Richard Nixon. The United States ended their involvement in the war because they were losing a lot of troops. This led to a chain reaction that led to huge protests in big cities in the US. The protests that took place in Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. had about 100,000 protesters. 30,000 continued to march to the Pentagon on the night of October 26, 1967. These protests took place over the course of 5 years until finally the US brought back their men home when Nixon signed the Paris Peace Accords on January 27, 1973. America ended their involvement in Vietnam. Due to tough circumstances in the US at the time, this led to rebellion and society was changing as a whole. Cinema was changing with society, and this is when Texas Chain Saw came in 1974. 5 years before the slasher genre properly erupted with the advent of John Carpenter's Halloween, Texas Chain Saw debuted with its Vietnam War anger, Watergate scandal, and fuel shortages. Tobe Hooper produced the film at a low budget of $140,000. This was an independent horror film, and Tobe Hooper also cast unknown actors from Central Texas, where the film was actually being shot at, in Austin. The Texas Chain Saw wasn't originally called this. Prior titles they were using for the movie were Stalking Leatherface and Head Cheese. Yes, that is right, Head Cheese. None of the titles fit, and so they came up with one last name for the film, and it was the Texas Chain Saw Massacre. It was a very catchy title, they said in the documentary. With a catchy title like that, they knew they had a movie the audience were willing to go see at drive-ins. The film was inspired by the true story of Ed Gein. Ed Gein was a human cannibal. After his mother's passing, Gein went to visit cemeteries so he can dig up fresh graves and bring parts of the dead bodies home. He will eat human parts and will also make furniture out of the bones. The most shocking part was that he even dressed up in the skin of the bodies. Everything that I have mentioned to you was in the movie. How the three main villains actually decorated the home, and also how Leatherface actually wore somebody else's skin over his own face. The bones used in the movie were all real. They used animal cadavers from a slaughterhouse that was near the house where they were filming, and they also used real human bones as well. Speaking of bones, they stated that one of them was driving on the countryside of Texas and found roadkill to use for the set. One of them found an armadillo on the road, and they used it for the beginning shots of the movie. The armadillo was freshly killed by a car, and they took it home and got a book about how to do taxidermy on it, and they learned how to do it from there. Originally, they were planning to get a dead dog, but they had a change of heart because they thought it was too cruel. The smell of the dead animals was horrible, especially since they were filming in the peak of summer. It was so bad that some of the crew members were throwing up outside between takes. Shooting for the Texas Chain Saw Massacre began on July 15, 1973. It lasts for 32 days, 7 days a week, 12 to 16 hours a day. They were working in the middle of summer. The days they filmed the movie were very hot. Due to the low budget of the movie, the actors only had one costume throughout the whole process of filming the Texas Chainsaw. The cast were forced to wear the same filthy outfit day after day in order to maintain continuity for 12 to 16 hours a day for the movie. They couldn't even wash their clothes if they wanted to. To make the character of Leatherface come to life without a voice or a face, Gunnar Hansen, the man who played Leatherface, stated that he went to a school which was a residential community for people who are slow. Hansen said that he spent 2 days on the campus walking and observing the way people moved. The creators of the cult classic described Leatherface as the most powerful character in the film and the most violent of the three main villains, including the most frightened. Even though Leatherface is extremely violent and dangerous, he was only really defending himself, the creators said. That is why in the movie he starts to freak out and was wondering where the kids were coming from. Fun fact about the movie: the actors weren't allowed to see Gunnar Hansen because they wanted them to be genuinely frightened of Leatherface. I think it was a smart move of Tobe Hooper to do this, so the actors could actually be scared of seeing Leatherface, to make the film look as real as possible. I wouldn't be surprised if other horror films in Hollywood picked up on this technique and they've used it in their own creative works. To be honest, I never really thought about this technique, so it was cool to learn about that. What makes the movie so terrifying to me is that it takes place in the middle of nowhere, and that just having the thought of some random guy chasing you with the chainsaw in the middle of the night, trying to chop you in half in the middle of nowhere, it's just scary. It's the overall atmosphere of the original that makes the Texas Chainsaw a one-of-a-kind movie. The movie has one chainsaw death, which isn't even really that graphic, and pretty much all of the violence is off-screen. However, it is very intense, and the grainy look of the film makes it feel much more raw and terrifying. I will also say that the cinematography and pacing of the movie was overall good. This film is definitely considered a masterpiece in the genre. If I was a kid in the 70s watching this movie in the middle of the night, I would have been scared of this movie. One day, a crew member brought his daughter on set. She was just a small girl at the time, playing around, minding her business. But one day, while the crew were filming, she stumbled upon the scene when Leatherface was slicing one of the main characters' head off with the chainsaw. He mentioned that she screamed and ran as fast as she could away from the set where they were filming. Like I said, I couldn't have imagined watching this movie when I was young. So far, I have only really seen this movie twice, and I gotta say, it's a good film. I haven't seen all the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies at the time of recording this video. I've only seen most of the movies that have come out after the 2000s. I've never really seen the older ones except the original one, but I gotta say, by far, I haven't seen a bad Texas Chainsaw Massacre film. They're all very enjoyable to me. Maybe the one that came out in 2022, not so much, but the movie was okay. Even though the Chucky franchise is my favorite one, Seed of Chucky wasn't really an enjoyable movie. But for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise, I haven't seen one movie that I did not hate, and that says a lot on how good these films are. The most disturbing scene in the movie was easily the infamous dinner scene by the ending of the movie. It approximately took about 26 hours to shoot. They filmed that scene during the daytime, and so they had to cover the windows to make it seem like they were filming at nighttime. Sally was tied to a chair at Leatherface's dinner table while the family of cannibals taunt and mock her for well over 5 minutes of screen time. The close-ups they used for Marilyn Burns' eyes while the family was just mocking and taunting her was very horrifying to look at. Marilyn Burns went on record saying that when they were filming this scene, she said that she wasn't really acting at all. She really was afraid. She felt at that moment like they were actually filming a snuff film, which means a movie that is based on people torturing other people. Gunnar Hansen brought the character to life the best way he could. When the movie was released to the world on October 1st, 1974, it made $16.5 million at the domestic box office that year. For its time, this was a huge success. Today at the domestic box office, it has made over $30.9 million. The filming conditions for this movie weren't good. By the ending of filming the movie, everyone from the actors to the crew members were pretty much tired, sore, and angry. In an interview, Tobe Hooper admitted in 2014 that everyone by the end of the production hated him. He said it just took years for them to kind of cool off. With that being said, the Texas Chain Saw Massacre made a huge impact on culture that still to this day is widely considered one of the greatest and most controversial horror films of all time, including a major influence on the horror genre. It's one of the best movies the genre has to offer. The movies that came after the original couldn't replicate the terror that was the first film. That is why the Texas Chain Saw Massacre is scary to this day. It's definitely a really scary movie, and I do believe this was a very influential film. Remember, I have also created an in-depth horror playlist about all the horror movies I have talked about over the years. So if you guys are interested, make sure to check out that playlist. And that is it, guys. Thank you so much for watching this video. Like and subscribe. Follow me on my social medias. And as always, take care and live to the fullest.